We are in a new age of mistrust in America today, where even the credibility of the President of the United States is up for debate. Speculation about a potential motive behind the President's announcements that he had contracted the coronavirus spread quickly across the internet as thousands logged on to say the diagnosis was a so-called October surprise or a last-minute play to change the outcome of the election. All this comes after a recent study by Cornell University found the president's name linked to nearly 38% of all coronavirus misinformation circulating online. For more on this, let's bring in CNET senior producer Dan Patterson. All right, Dan, so explain to us what we were seeing on Friday with social media posts initially questioning whether it was even true that the president had contracted the coronavirus.
So, Vlad, generally when we talk about trends and politics and disinformation on social media, we're talking about bots and sock puppets or inauthentic accounts trying to manipulate the system. In this case, we saw a lot of authentic accounts, both liberal and conservative voices in the media and other prominent pundits questioning whether President Trump had the coronavirus. We saw kind of this diverse spectrum of voices questioning whether it was true, whether it was planted, whether the symptoms were as severe as Trump said. And this was exasperated when Mark Meadows came out and gave a differing report to the president's status. So often, again, when we talk about manipulating social media, we have misinformation and we have disinformation. Disinformation are those bots and sock puppets. Misinformation are rumors. And when rumors and gossip is spread based on zero facts, it can kind of light up an ecosystem that is as tense as this one is right now.
Did the posts change after the president was admitted to Walter Reed Medical Center and as we started to learn more about his condition, or did that sort of outright denial that he was even sick or any of that, did that still feature prominently in social media?
Yeah, well, Anne-Marie, what we saw is kind of this metastasizing of voices. We saw the scale increase pretty dramatically. In fact, using a tool called Meltwater Social, which is like a spreadsheet designed for social media, I pulled Twitter posts, and it looks like posts questioning President Trump's COVID-19 diagnosis were up 59% over the weekend. But the things that they were talking about, the spectrum, that broad spectrum of voices we were talking about, that became more diverse. So it kind of stretched out with all sorts of conspiracies, misinformation, and disinformation in that environment.
So, Dan, why does it seem like conspiracy theories are moving further into the mainstream? And if you're going to say it's because oftentimes the president or his children or his surrogates retweet information or repost misinformation and conspiracy theories to their social media accounts, I get that. But then what happens after that?
Yeah, so one misconception is that conspiracies are kind of tied to a partisan ideology. And what we find is that conspiracies or the belief in conspiracies are entirely nonpartisan and not tied to a particular personality type, but they do tend to thrive when an online information environment is really confusing and noisy, and when we have a mixture of traditionally authoritative information or authoritative voices from, say, places we used to trust, like the CDC, degraded or demonized over time. So those two factors, a kind of confusing and noisy social media ecosystem combined with the degrading of traditional authoritative voices, creates this toxic mix of misinformation and challenging voices.
So speaking of that, I think we mentioned the Cornell study found that 38% of coronavirus misinformation online mentions the president's name. That was before the president was diagnosed. What are we seeing now, and I know it's only been a few days, now in terms of the online activity regarding the president and the virus?
Well, our default posture has kind of shifted in the last few months or even years from typically trusting sources of authority to not trusting these sources of authority. And what we have seen over this past weekend is that those sources are not able to deliver authoritative or reliable information. And this week, leading into a Monday, some of those trends have become incredibly toxic is maybe an overused term, but there are threats that are emerging from this environment, both on the left and the right, targeting some of the voices like Fauci and others that are fairly or remain fairly credible. So, Anne-Marie, the real challenging thing happening right now is that it's a noisy environment and it's hard to get a clear read on exactly what's happening.
All right, Dan. Well, that's why we come to you, to give us a little guidance, a little roadmap so we know what's happening. You are senior producer at CNET. Thank you so much.
Great to see you.